everyone, this is Jonathan Dornbush from IGN, and we just saw a pretty packed war table presentation for Marvel's Avengers, which is coming out later this year, and I am thankfully joined by Scot Amos from Crystal Dynamics, the head of the studio, to help break down everything we saw in that presentation, because there was quite a lot. Scott, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm living the dream. It's so much fun to get all of this stuff out there. I mean, we've been waiting for quite a while, and I'm sure the fans have been waiting for quite a while to see and hear all this stuff, so it's great to finally get it out there.
Well, yeah, this is definitely, we've seen bits and pieces of the game through some trailers that have come out since the original unveiling at E3 last year with the A-Day demo, but this is perhaps the biggest chunk of the game that we've seen, and we get a taste of the story, the co-op and Warzone, and as well as what actual, a gameplay and a campaign mission looks like. So there's a lot to break down here. But first off, I wanted to start with a general sort of overview of all these bits and pieces. Marvel's Avengers seems like such a massive game. Why were these the pieces sort of that the team wanted to convey about the game at this point?
Well, I would say that before things had kind of changed in the world here a few months back, we had this thought of early in the year starting to talk about co-op and then kind of breadcrumbing our way towards what would have been kind of, that classic summer event that we all get together in LA for. But because everything changed, it became how do we do this? How do we get so much information from our villain and be able to introduce MODOK finally and talk about what our villain is? Take Kamala from the introduction we did at the end of last year and say, let's go a little further into that story and that narrative. And that's just, again, that campaign and that story of her ascension and where she's going and how she's reassembling the Avengers. But we really hadn't done more than just tease some co-op and showing off both multiplayer and how war zones work with AI companions. And then the depth of combat for skills, for gear, all of that stuff, literally, we just touched on it kind of at the end of last year. So we're like, wait, this is the stuff we want to get into where people can know, yes, this is a Marvel's Avengers world where you have this great story with these characters you get to fall in love with all over again through that crystal lens, but also so much gameplay that we just haven't talked about and shown what it's like to be four players. How do you actually have team buffs that can work together? The team finishers you got to see in the Thor mission, even once an Avenger. So just all of this stuff to us has been building up for a long time. And we're like, we got to show everybody. We got to get people that broader perspective of how much is in this game.
Yeah, it's so expansive, and this even just being a taste of it so impressed me with how much there really is to talk about with this game. So let's start with, as you were sort of saying at the beginning, the villain. We get the reveal here that MODOK is one of the major villains for this game, and I love that choice because a lot of people's more modern recognition of the Marvel Universe perhaps relates to some movies out there, but MODOK has these deep roots in the comics. Why did MODOK make so much sense as a villain for this story that the team wants to tell?
The thing we love about MODOK is because it is really tied deeply into the comic roots of looking back and saying, you need something for our game that was an Avengers level threat. Somebody who could outsmart them, somebody could actually have technology and power, that could actually come up with ways that could say, how can I take on an Avenger, let alone all of the Avengers, and be able to have a serious impact and threat to be able to stop them? Because in MODOK's world, his mentality, George Tarleton starts as a scientist working with Tony Stark and trying to develop new clean energy for the world. So these noble goals, saying starting there, and then when things go wrong at the beginning of the game in A-Day that we showed last year, the idea of how does that then start this transcension of both Kamala and Tarleton, who are both there on day one. Her path goes towards the Inhuman and becoming the hero and that point of view character we relate to, whereas Tarleton starts going from his noble purpose of saving the world and building clean energy to, you know what, we need to save the world with science over superheroes. And so as MODOK evolves, you kind of see George being corrupted in that process, and then his purpose gets corrupted and goes to this extreme level of, no, it'd be better if we just control the world. It'd be better if we make the decisions for you, because science can really be a better choice than what you people are doing. And oh my God, superheroes are dangerous, and how can we trust them? So for us, creating that Avengers level threat and having somebody who is a fresh face, as Casey says, a big face in this case, as an enemy, as a villain who has this mastery of technology and this ability to take this to a conclusion that might be an extreme point of view, immediately sets up science versus superheroes, which gives us a natural conflict for the entire story.
Well, and of course, on the flip side of that, as you were saying, you have Kamala, who's, as we saw in the teases after the A-Day demo, is coming into her powers now, but she is a huge fan of this Avengers team. Could you tell me a little bit about her introduction to the story and how big of a role she is? Because I know the team has sort of said before, she's essentially the protagonist of this story.
It is definitely, Kamala for us is that point of view character. She's the hero from a absolute fan level, the very opening part of the game where she's at A-Day, where she's there because she's a fan of superheroes. She's a very specific fan of the Avengers. She's written fan fiction in our world. Like, you will actually be able to collect pages of her fan fiction and read some of the things that she's written about these heroes that she just idolizes, and be able to see from her perspective, like the rest of us, we're fans of the Avengers. We're fans of heroes, and we also want to find our way to fit into this world. So looking at her origin, looking at Pakistani American, looking at this relationship she has with the world, with her family, but even beyond that, with this superhero family, and saying, wow, this really synchronizes nicely with a player's point of view, with this new hero's point of view. And Kamala, 2014 is when she got her own series, so she's relatively new in the world from the comic side. So this is really that big blockbuster kind of moment for us, of saying, let's put her front and center and be able to say, yeah, we know these other heroes from, be it movies or from shows or from whatever cinematic series, all the way to comic books, of course, and be able to say, with Kamala, we have this new way of looking at those heroes, kind of like we're looking at them through our Crystal Dynamics lens anyway, saying, let's bring people together, synchronize those players with Kamala's point of view, and then her ascension to becoming Miss Marvel. And so for us, that's that fun ride that you get to go on, of feeling really from the beginning part of this, and then getting your favorite heroes together. And now you have your team of Avengers with Kamala as the newest one joining that team.
Well, and speaking of putting those powers into the player's hands, let's dive a little bit into the gameplay aspects of what we saw from the War Table, because I think it really sort of only touches the tip of the iceberg, basically, of how deep and complex the customization here can be. And I was curious if you could speak to the team's ethos about, wanting people to be able to play these iconic heroes, but also make them their own versions of these heroes within that framework.
Oh, absolutely. I think you got to speak with Vince Napoli, our combat director, and you can just tell Vince's passion for combat and great heroes and how they play. And he and his team looked at this and said, we want each hero to feel like they could be their own game. Like, how would Black Widow play? How would Thor play? How would Iron Man? What are the things I want for these heroes if I'm sitting there playing a game just based on them, and then mashing them all together into one massive product? But then, beyond that, you start looking at these heroes from every perspective, that people could be showing up for the first time who may not know these heroes. Believe it or not, there are people who may not know who they are. And then there's the people who show up expecting certain things. Like, they expect Hulk to be able to grab enemies and smash them together and pound them into the ground. So there's a matter of feeding that expectation, but also making sure people can show up just brand new to it and say, this is a fun action adventure, what's the cool story, and get to know these heroes by playing with them. Like, wow, this guy really feels like this crazy rage-infused tank who's out there to help. This guy feels like the God of Thunder, who actually has this magic hammer that he can use and be able to bring lightning and summon storms. So for us, it was really the core of who these characters are, making sure we build their skill trees and their systems around that and their heroics around that. And if you just pick up and play, you can play this game. You can go through and button mash, you will get through an amazing story, and you'll feel like, wow, I understand, these were fun heroes. But then there's that next layer of saying, how do I customize their skills even further? Not just picking a few of the top level skills, but going inside some of those skills where you actually have what we call pick threes, where you can choose kind of what that skill actually does in full function. And even beyond the skills, then you have gear. And then the gear has attributes on top of it. And now the attributes can be leveled up and boosted through resources, and you can start finding better and better gear. So now you have this really fine-tooth ability to say, this is the tuning that I want from my Thor. I want him to play like this, with these types of powers, with these specific attributes. And you can really get down to saying, I want to make my Thor play my way.
Well, and of course, then you can take your Thor the way you want him to play, and then jump into the Warzone missions and play with someone else's Hulk, which may play very differently from your Hulk. I was wondering if you could briefly, since we're running a little short on time, talk about sort of the Warzone aspect of this game, because it is such a massive bit of it. Of course, there's the campaign mission, but also these Warzone missions. How do they factor into the larger picture?
Yeah, the shortest version is you have a campaign that is made out of hero missions, and the hero missions are designed, crafted specifically by Sean, creative director, and his team, saying, this is the story you want to tell. This hero in this time, or even these heroes that we will switch you between to go on that hero mission for a narrative purpose. But interwoven with those hero missions are war zones. And as you collect these heroes, reassembling them on the campaign, they will open up levels, war zones. And then even after the campaign is when the war zones really open up, with this much bigger areas to go to, much crazier places to go and find, and they all have narrative with them as well. So in a war zone, this is where you can take your hero, your favorite if you want to play Hulk or Kamala or whoever, and then you can have your AI companions, your team of customized heroes. So if you've geared up Thor a certain way, certain skills, certain gear, certain attributes, that Thor will appear as your AI companion. And you can have, again, your whole team of 3 companions with you as the core hero, so 4 in any war zone. Or you can mix and match AI companions with human companions. So war zones are designed to be co-op from the beginning. So you'll always have a team in there, whether it's a team of AI with you, your particular AI, or it's humans that swap in. So for us, war zones literally are that kind of bread and butter where you get through the campaign, you have the story, the state of the world is set up, then the world opens up. Now you have your team that you can go and level up and go and see what else AIM is doing. What are those kind of deep secrets and research out there in the sub-sunken wastelands of these hidden bases that we have under the Arctic? You're like, oh my God, what's going on there? Like there's things you have yet to discover. The campaign is just the beginning.
Yeah, it sounds so expansive, and there is so much to dive into, and I'm really glad we had this War Table presentation to start to unwrap some of these layers, but I can't wait to see even more of Marvel's Avengers as we lead up to the launch later this year. Scott, thank you so much for joining me. I know there's plenty more to talk about, and hopefully we'll be able to soon, but that'll wrap us up for now. Thank you so much for watching, and please check out all of our Marvel's Avengers coverage on IGN.
Excellent. Thank you, guys.